Welcome to the Budget Committee meeting. We'll, first thing I'm going to do is a notice of remote meeting. As chairman of the Municipal Budget Committee, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis and in accordance with the Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously through the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing access to the meeting by telephone and with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting, and all members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom platform. And the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in the meeting through dialing area code 301-715-8597 and meeting ID 926-371-29750. Excuse me. B, providing public's notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting via Zoom. Instructions are provided on the Town of Newmarket website at www.newmarketnh.gov. C, there are provisions made to alert the public body during the meeting. If there are any problems with access, please call 602-292-1221. And D, we will adjourn this meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event this happens, the meeting will be rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done via roll call. Okay. That out of the way. Let's do a quickie little roll call. When I call your name, you just say whether you are that you're present and whether you're alone, whether you have somebody with you. Mr. LeBranch. Mike, you on mute?
There we go. Present and alone.
Okay. Mr. Caddy.
Present and alone.
Mr. Les Savoy.
Present and alone.
Okay. Mr. Gold called in. He can't make it tonight, so he's excused. Mr. Wolf.
Present and alone.
Mr. Matozzi.
Present and alone.
Mr. Swanson.
Present and alone.
Okay. Zach, the town council representative resigned, and they don't have an alternate. I was going to ask Steve tonight who they were going to assign. So I guess there's no town representative tonight. And Chairman Mr. Lamattina is here and alone, present alone. That. Okay, as we start the meeting now, I'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. With that, the meeting is officially started. First thing we do is public comment. Seeing no members of the public, I guess we can call public comment ended at 7:03. Okay. So the first thing up is the town financials. Bill, we have a lot of new members here, so I wonder if you could kind of introduce yourself and then could you kind of like walk us through the three documents that you gave us? And then we have some questions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Tappan. I'm the Finance and Administration Director for the town. The three documents that I sent over and commonly get sent every month are the expense report, the revenue report, and then the final one is which we don't usually spend too much time on it, which is the preliminary grant report. The grant report basically is all the various funds that are, trying to think of the best way to explain this. They're areas where, for example, pistol permits, if we've gotten a grant for pistol permits, that goes directly to the police, and the purpose of that is to do things for the police department, like I'm trying to think off the top of my head, would replenish firearms, say. If you were to go down, you see McIntosh and Tucker well project. That was a well project. There was money in there at one point for the purpose of improving that well. And it was a state grant. And then those monies were, that basically those lines show what the state of that grant is in terms of the burn rate, whether or not it's all used up, if there's anything that's left over that needs to be used, whatever. McAllen Dam project is in there. So these are some of these that it's actually not the perfect wording for this this area, because they're not all grants. McAllen Dam, for example, was not a grant. It was a bonded project. We actually used the municipal bond, New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank to borrow those funds and pay for that project. So anyway, it's just kind of showing you the state of those particular funds that are directed at specific things for the town. The two reports that we generally spend the most time on naturally is the expenditure report. For obvious reasons, that's the general fund money that's being spent. It's the one that you all are focused on when you're doing the review of our budgets every year. And so the idea is to make sure that we're staying in line with expectations. And if we're not, we're trying to explain what happened and why to the best of our ability. And then the same thing holds true for the revenue reports. The revenue reports are these are the various lines showing basically where revenue comes from for the town. And it's the same thing. We're, at the beginning of the year, we're doing an estimate to the best of our ability for what we believe the revenue will be for that next year. Does that help? Anybody have any questions about the explanation?
So I'll open it up to questions for Bill. And Mike, you're on mute.
How's that?
Yeah.
Better?
We can
Now
hear
I'm
you.
on, okay. Okay, so we can ask questions in regards to the actual expense report and everything, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, I guess my first well, I've only got one question, but it's on two different items that we've already overexpended for this fiscal year.
Yeah.
That being the legal fees and the roadways and sidewalks. And I'm wondering if there's maybe any explanation as to why we've gone over those at this point.
Yeah, so the legal fees, I'm trying to think of how much I can really say. I know that there were there were a couple of things that were HR related that came up, which were not expected and have caused us to spend a little bit more than was anticipated on attorney's fees. In terms of the roadways and sidewalks, my understanding is that we ended up using more salt than was anticipated this year, even though it wasn't a particular. My understanding is, according to the DPW director, and he can correct me later if I'm wrong on this, and I'll get back to you and let you know, is that when there's a lot of snow, we end up using less salt and sand. And when there's when there's less snow, we end up using the other way around. when it's not a lot of snow, then we end up using a lot. When there is, we don't use as much. And so that, I think, played into this year's overage in that area. The other thing that I want to mention, since you focus on two of the things that I figured you'd probably ask about, is the other thing to remember is that this is you look at the whole budget basically with the general fund, and then of course I'm looking at the overall operating budget. And what we're trying to do generally, we're looking for shooting at a kind of a baseline target. So, for example, for March, you're trying to be no more than overall 75% spent. If you're around that level, usually under is preferable, then you're in good shape. In other words, you're more or less on target. If you're too underspent, then it's questionable about your budgeting abilities. Maybe you're, you're padding. We're not doing that, but that usually is the perception if you're so underspent. And then the opposite is true. If you're really overspending your budget, you're not predicting things very well. So in our
Right.
case, for example, we were running at let's see, for March, we were at 74% for the general fund budget spent. So we were 1% under, which is not amazingly fantastic, but it's also not bad. We're on target. You could look at that and say, wow, good budgeting.
I have a couple of questions. So
Sure.
in general, I guess COVID hasn't been as bad as we thought maybe a year ago. Can you just talk a little to that?
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting. We have the areas where we really got hit the hardest would be in revenue. And there were some, and I think also in terms of expectations around revenue too. The expenditures we really didn't see a major hit there. And the reason was because we had the federal government shelling out money first through the Gopher, which was the federal funds that get funneled through the state. And then that was met with a 25% or FEMA, 75% FEMA match. And so between the two, it covered a lot of the COVID related expenses that we would have incurred, such as PPP, the protective measures, masks, overtime related to, guys having to be on call and so on, extra duty that was related to, emergency first responders in town. So I think that's buffered us quite a bit actually as a community, because we would have taken a hit. The other thing is that because of the federal funds, we were able to do some things that that I had planned to do, but it made it less expensive for us as a community or I was thinking about doing, but it wasn't necessarily in my plans. And I'll give you an example. We had our VPN was older, that device, and it was also basically the capacity was at a certain level. Well, all of a sudden we were in the position of having a lot of people who were wanting to or needed to work from home. If we wanted to maintain operations, I had to make that happen. Well, because of Gopher funding, we were able to spend the money to get an enhanced VPN and firewall. So that's an example of where we were able to, do some things. We didn't take the financial hit as a community because the federal government was helping us out. So.
Any other questions from the board?
None here.
Sorry, I just have one quick question. Do you know if we finished the taking over the Route 108, the Newmarket portion of Route 108 yet? For Main Street, North Main Street from the state?
I don't, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I've just noticed that we have a bridge line item for bridges, which I was a little surprised by. And I was wondering if that's gonna go up in the future.
Oh, well, let me write your question down so that I can,
It's mine. I mean, I didn't even know we had a bridges line item. And we've only spent $800 out of it, so. But I
yeah.
was just wondering if in the future, increase that. I understand the expected costs are pretty low.
Well, so that's, I mean, actually, let me make sure I have your, could you repeat your question? I'm gonna write it down and I'm gonna talk with,
Yeah, I just wondered if, once we finish accepting the North Main Street portion of Route 108 in town, whether we're gonna increase our expected expenses for the bridge line item, which is 014313. It's currently at $6,000.
and you're concerned about that going up in,
I would just assume we're
in
gonna
our
reduce that
budget?
line item a little bit because we're gonna have a substantially larger bridge that we need to think about. And I was just curious of what that might be.
Okay. I'll take that up with the Public Works Director. I have this sense because of what's happening with the ARP funding from the federal government pushed by the White House. Because they're pushing infrastructure projects. I don't know, but there's a chance that that's something, that's a thing that would be probably fall under that umbrella. I know for sure they're really pushing water projects, both wastewater and regular water for water treatment and so on, piping and all that. The thing that I've been on quite a few calls with the White House has been putting on some really good things, but also the National League of Cities. And because everybody's trying to figure out, okay, so what's allowed under the rules here with the funding that's been passed? And it's still a little bit unclear. The thing that I'm trying to understand is there any way for us to be able to take advantage of some of these funds so that the town doesn't get hit with the full cost of these, because we've engaged, and it was part of it was being will be paid for by either wastewater treatment fund or the drinking water funds. But what I want to do, instead of having to take low interest loans from them with some forgiveness, I'd like to see how much we could get that will reduce that principal and interest for us. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think the bridge, as I recall from our analysis that was done on the bridge, I think it's in pretty good shape, but I was just curious. So thank you.
Yeah. I'll follow up with him and I'll try to remember to get back to you as soon as I can.
No rush at all. Thank you.
Any other questions? Chris?
Yeah, looking at the preliminary grant report, and it would be Fund 26 Macintosh and Tucker Well Project. It looks like we're about $175,000 short on that project. So my only question is whether, if this is a grant or whatever, how this actually works, how do we fund the variance there? It's on the first page,
Yeah.
2/3 of the way down. So you got the well project and the water project are on the same group of expenses.
Yeah. Well, so the Mac and Tucker well project, I'm going to have to go back and look at this a little bit more closely, because if the way I'm reading this, our ending balance is a negative 18,385. So, and I'm not sure. I got to make sure that this is finished for where we are and why we're at a negative 18,000.
So the end of the quarter, it showed a negative of 174,000.
Where did you see that? I'm not seeing that.
On the grants line, item 26, McIntosh and Tucker Well project.
Yeah, where's the 175,000? That's the part I'm not.
It's an ending balance over to the right.
Yeah, that is.
Bill, we're working from the March.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good gravy.
March document.
My apologies. I was looking at the wrong one. Sorry about that. Okay, let's look at this again. Okay, yes. I'm not sure. I will have to get back to you on this, Chris. My apologies.
But I can add one thing, and that is, Chris, those are part of the enterprise funds. And so any overage there would be borne by the water users, not the town per se.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just trying to
and
understand how it works in terms how you fund the, if you have a negative balance like this, I assumed it just came out of the, it'll probably just roll down one line item and pick it up from there, but just trying to understand, new to this process, so, sources and uses of funds, just trying to get some clarity on that.
I think it is confusing that the enterprise funds are totally separate from the town. They have to be reported because of the RSAs, but
right.
and they're part of the town's budget, but they are totally independent. So any overage there would be a indebtedness by the water utility effectively, and they would collect that in their revenues from the water users.
That's right. Yep. They treat them differently, as do they treat the debt limit differently too than they do with the town. Their debt limit is higher overall than is allowed to go higher than the regular municipal debt.
Okay.
So I'll need to get back to you on that. I'm sorry, I didn't have an answer. The interesting part of that is I know that that some of this, I want to make sure that that's not also connected with the line 27, which is water projects, because I know that McIntosh Well, there's a few things going on there. And I want to make sure that they're not actually tied together somehow. Because I know that these are fully covered and there won't be an overage in the end. So that's why I'm curious too, now that you asked that question.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mike, you have a question?
Yes, while we're on the grant report, can you explain why on item 17 Comcast, we're a beginning balance of negative $19,904?
I'm wondering if they owe us money at that point.
Can you go after them?
Oh yeah, but this changes. Hold on one second. I'm gonna. We were just reviewing these contracts, as a matter of fact, with.
Because I'm sure if I miss paying my bill for 2 or 3 months, they're gonna take care of me, so.
You're absolutely right.
You got that, Bill, then?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I do have one, just quickie. The McCallum Dam I know they ran into some issues at the end that they weren't expecting. On the March is showing that we're under budget by $240,000, 243. Is that actually correct? Did they actually come in under budget? I know it was a bonded issue.
Right. Well, no, I mean, at that point, they were probably, they just hadn't finished because there was extra, I knew there was additional work that was still going on, I think, or just wrapping up at that point.
Okay.
And we may not have had the final bill. So that's probably why that stands where it does. I'm looking ahead a month here. Yeah. Yeah, I'm assuming that's what that is. It's that final invoicing hadn't been done.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for Bill? Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
welcome.
I'll send you and Steve a note just on the 3 questions that we've got here, and also a question about who's going to replace Zach on the committee,
Okay.
and a question about setting up some meetings with the department heads for the new guys. Okay. All right, thanks, Bill.
You're welcome. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Up next, we have the school budget for quarter ending March. Jana and Sue, we have a bunch of new people here. Jana, we'll start with you. Can you introduce yourself, and then I'll let Susan introduce herself, and then you can take over.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joe. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Great. Hi, my name is Jana Mellon. I started with the district in July. First off, I'd like to just thank all of you for volunteering in this capacity. I know sometimes it's a lot of work, especially during budget season, and just thank you to the new members for throwing your hat in the ring and offering your service to the town.
Susan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I will. Good evening. My name is Susan Gibbons, and I'm the superintendent of schools for the school district. And I'm delighted to be here and meeting with all of you. Though I'm held in suspense because the girls softball last home game was underway and I ran from that to get here, and I don't know if they won or they didn't. So I'm hoping I might get a text while we're here, and if so, I'll let you know if we won.
Very good. Okay, so we'll throw it out. One of the things that the group wanted to talk about was the school audit, specifically Sue, Jana or Sue. If you guys can address on the school audit from January, the findings that they had and what, what corrective actions are being taken, I guess.
Well, I guess I would say, first of all, that we've addressed in some fashion all of the items there, some to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the time required in order to fully implement measures to address them. But, we weren't sure if there was any specific item that you were wondering about, or if it was, we've adopted some policies and certainly put in some procedures to address most of those issues, but didn't know if you were looking at anything in particular that you would like us to speak to.
So I'll open it up to the group. Was there any specific item you guys wanted questions on?
I was interested in the issues that were brought up in the audit. And I know that Jana was not here at the time that this refers to, but I was wondering what we've done, action you've taken, for instance, in securing payroll files and purchase orders.
I'll let Jana address those.
Sorry, I was on mute there. So I don't believe that the issue was with regard to, those were more control procedure issue. There wasn't any issue with the payroll numbers. Mr. Katie, I just want to make sure you're aware of that. So
Understand. No, it was a security of the files.
Right. There was a human resources, you're talking about the human resources files comment that they needed to be locked up, that one?
Well, it's page 3, access to payroll files. It's not secure location and restricted access.
Oh, okay, yeah, those were related to some of our human resources. We have two kinds of files. We have active human resources that are locked up in a specific room up at the SAU. But then when employees exit, we had some archival files that were transferred to the business office. And there were some issues with some keys that had been lost, from what I understand. We've had a locksmith in, and then he has rekeyed all of the file cabinets. So we now have, everything is perpetually locked, and we have a security, a log. So if you do access one of these files, you have to write down your name, the time you accessed, and which file you accessed. So that is attached right to our file cabinets at this point.
Okay.
Oh, and purchase orders. We have an accountant in the office who, she's fantastic, and she has a lot of accounting experience from her time with the state. She has worked really hard along with the rest of the team to put in place purchasing procedures. One of the items that was found was there were instances when they pulled the sample audit where a purchase order didn't precede the invoice. So she has worked incredibly hard. We now have a process in place where employees are required to use the requisition process, which creates the purchase order before entering. She's taken it a whole other level too. She's worked with some of our high volume vendors and created some more securities around purchasing based on account protocols that we can set up with the individual vendors requiring a purchase order. So we have worked pretty hard in that area to shore that up. And there's more work to be done with some of these things, but I believe those are the issues we discussed with the board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There was an earlier discussion, either a month or two ago, about the food service negative balances. Are you changing your procedure there?
Yes, we have. We have changed it effective July 1st to make sure, in fact, we will be bringing forward a list of any negative student balances to be written off to the school board for formal approval to do so going forward. That's part of one of the changes we made.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the audit? Rich, you're on mute, Richard.
Yeah, I was just curious a little bit about the crowdsource funding issue. It seemed like that was a real challenge. People off, raising money kind of independently of a process in lots of different websites. And I'm just curious how you trying to get your arms around that.
Susan, did you want to address that one?
Sure. There have been an awful lot of, let's say, informal groups that have set up crowdsourcing as a way to be able to raise funds for a whole host of different reasons. Some are specifically school district organizations, and others are not affiliated with us, though related. For example, Project Graduation raises money using crowdsourcing. GoFundMe type of things, though they're school related, they're not Newmarket specific accounts related to us here. So we've not made a significant amount of progress on that, addressing that. The first step would be, of course, to identify where they are being used and the creation of a policy. And then moving forward with teaching people who are using those tools how to either use those in a way that is secure or eliminate the use of them for other strategies that would serve their purpose. So we're still doing some investigating in that area.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that seems a little bit challenging because you don't really know if it's something sponsored by the town or the school, or if it's somebody off, doing their own thing, right?
Exactly. Oftentimes you find that people will use your name and it may not be us specifically, but you'll see, a school's name being used or the town's name being used for, we'll say, a non, what may appear to be related to kids here, but not necessarily ours, under our umbrella. So.
Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, Roger?
I have one for Susan. I think there was some discussion about whether you were going to change auditors. Has a decision been made with respect to that?
We did that for this year, and I think we did a 3-year contract that could be extended up to 5, I believe is that, did I get that right? Yeah, we went out and bid those services around this time last year. So we changed auditing firms, and when you do change auditing firms, oftentimes with fresh eyes, you get a whole list of things that didn't appear in prior years. Because when a new auditing firm comes on board, they're starting from scratch. They know nothing about your school district. So they ask you for procedure manuals and all sorts of documentation. And then they review, typically in my experience, at a much higher level than somebody that's been reviewing your procedures and protocols and financial statements year in, year out. It's always good to change auditors periodically. And so we were very pleased with the quality of staff that they brought in, and felt that they did a top-notch job reviewing our financial statements, our systems, and internal controls.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions on the audit? Okay, on to the quarterly financial report. Jen, if you kind of like walk us through the documents, you have a new format here too, which I think is pretty good, but I like the category by category.
Well, thank you. Actually, Dr. Givens, you may not know this, but she was a business administrator for many, many years before coming here in the superintendent role. So she has an awful lot of guidance and some really great ideas about presentation of data, which I've learned a lot since I've come to this district from. So some of this format, while we constantly look to provide the most meaningful information and to make our reports very meaningful and easy to read, this was kind of our first structural attempt at coming up with this format. So in the past, in our school district, we have function codes, which mean a lot to me in the business office, but don't necessarily always translate in the general public very well. For example, if you have executive administrative services, I know that means my SAU services, but to a layperson, it might not. So we took this opportunity to present the financials in 2 different ways. One, the way that we have historically presented them, which is by function code, showing the expenditures in those function codes. But then we took the same financials and presented them to you a different way, which is by object code, which tends to be the things that people understand more readily, like salaries, benefits, operations. Everybody understands what salaries are. Everybody understands what repairs and maintenance and supplies are. So it kind of just gels it down a different way. It's the same bottom line number, but it's another way of looking at it. And I found it to be really valuable because there are some things that get hidden in the function code report that pop right out when you look at it a different way. So it allows us to put together, after each of those particular presentations, we put together a table and we kind of go through that list, and anything that's an outlier, good or bad, that's of significance, we try and make some notes to help explain to the readers why those things are different or than we had budgeted. So some of the notes are pretty self-explanatory. A lot of our variances this year have stemmed from salaries related to COVID-19, our inability to hire staff for certain positions and our need to hire extra staff in other positions. So you'll see some of that as you look through. We have had supplies and equipment that have been higher than normal. Again, due to COVID-19, we've needed to source a lot of different types of PPE and desk dividers and things like that. We have been able to reap the benefit of some grant funding, some pretty significant grant funding to offset our expenditures. But you can still see net of those grant funded reimbursements that we still have some areas where we have over expended certain areas. And we continue to look at grant funding as a resource. We have some additional grant funding that will be coming forward. In addition, we just found word of another FEMA project that we're looking into. Hope to bring the board more information on that at the next board meeting. But we do have a variety of sources and we continue to look through to see if there are ways to benefit the community. And then the next part of the financial report is just a graphic. It kind of shows you how much we've actually expended in the pink. I hope yours are in color. Mine are. But in the biggest section, if it's black and white, that is the expended amount. And then the next largest piece of the pie is what's encumbered, which means we know we're going to owe it. We haven't yet expended it out of our budget because we haven't finished our payroll. Most of those are payroll type of items or open purchase orders. And then the final is what we have remaining that's not encumbered or expended for the year. So there was, as of 3/31, there was about 11%. And then the final exhibit, it shows you the year-to-date expenditures, and this one shows it by the kind of the function code categories. So salaries, benefits, and operations. And you can see about half of our budget is salaries and benefits, and about roughly half as of this point at 3/31 was operational related expenditures.
I have two questions. One, does a function code roll up to one and only one line item in the categories?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean, like a function code, like and I'll give you an example. 1100 is our big function code. That's general education. So all of our teachers at the high school, middle school, elementary school that are not special ed or not a librarian or something special like that would be under 1100.
So, okay, so how do I know what lines of line items roll up into supplies on the rolled up code? So that's the thing is, this is great to have the categories, the one pager here where you kind of see everything. But then if we want to drill down into, say, software or something, how do I know what function codes or what line items roll up into that? Do you have a legend somewhere that?
Well, we have a report that has 1,500 individual general ledger lines on it that we run, but sometimes it's not the most meaningful to look at those specific things because you may look at one line that's overexpended in a particular function code for software, but we had to buy it in another area. It's still software. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but we don't generally present our financials in that way to the board.
So, well, okay, so the bottom line is when I look at the expenditures by function code, I can't say function code 1100 and 3200, whatever, roll up into administrative salaries. I'm just making numbers up here, but I can't do that, right?
Oh,
No.
I understand what you're getting at. No, they don't. So,
Okay.
and I don't know the general ledger, like the format of the account that the town uses, but each part of our code tells you a different thing. So in like 1100, if I understand what you're saying, Joe, we would have administrator salaries, which would be 5110. We would have teacher salaries, which would be 5112. So when you're looking at regular education in the function code, that's everything that went in 1100: salaries, operations, benefits. When you look at it by object code, the salaries that we show is net salaries for everything together and benefits for everything together.
Okay. So the bottom line is I really can't pick, A, B, and C roll up to this, X, Y, Z roll up to that.
Yeah, this is the rolled up number. Yeah.
Okay.
They're two entirely different presentations.
Mm.
Function codes, even from an educational standpoint, don't really have a lot of meaning the way that they are written here. A lot of times what happens with function codes is they're created because some legislative body wishes for us to track information in a certain way. And so it isn't necessarily clear, the interrelationship between even different function codes and the work that we're doing, boots on the ground. So for us, using the function codes really doesn't produce any meaning.
Mm.
It doesn't tell us a thing, doesn't help us, tie work that we're doing to something that's meaningful for us to measure. More closely mirrored to what we would use from a managerial perspective is the report that we've provided, the second one, which is line item. I don't know if you can see it, I don't have everything, but the line item format is much more consistent with how we would manage, right? We manage our salary accounts through the hiring and transition of employees. Benefits for those employees are tracked based on, people, being added to and or changing, benefits that they're accessing. And then operations, usually when, the way we think about it frequently, with the exception of like debt service and like utilities, if there's any we'll say discretion, it would be in whether we spend, money to buy supplies and materials or not. There's very little discretionary money in what we do to provide an educational program for kids. It really, in education, we think about it coming down to just a few buckets of money, right? That this is the way that are the big items, and that is salary, benefits, special education, transportation, utilities, and that takes up and debt service, and that usually takes up about 99% of your budget.
Mhm.
And then supplies, materials, and repairs take up a very small sliver. So presenting in this way, it's meaningful to us, and it's much more understandable from a public's perspective, because these are things that we can put our hands on. We know what furniture is, but you can't tell in the other report, if you're looking at it by function code, what the hell within that function code you're spending money on. And what does that mean anyways? When you have to subdivide furniture into each of those function codes, it just starts to become dissected in a way that it's really hard to understand, what is really going on. So that's why the presentation and the we're kind of in the process of transferring to this different format, and wanted you to see both formats, the function code, which I guess is the traditional way you've seen it, and then more of a line item approach moving forward, so that we can track it in a way that we can develop a language and really better understand how we're spending money in a way that's meaningful.
So, yeah, so when it gets down to, like, somebody looks at, like you say, furniture, say, hey, $1.6 million for furniture, what the hell did you buy?
Mhm.
Then you're saying, Jenna, that it's like 1,500 line items?
Yeah, because for each one of those function codes we have
Yeah.
a whole set of line items, that salary, benefit, furniture, dues, in every single one. So when we look at that, I can look at furniture and I can pull it from all cost centers and see where we spent the furniture and where it went to.
Any other questions from the committee? Mike?
Yes, just curious, under what function would we find the legal expenses?
Legal expenses in our budget, they don't have their own function code. That would be kind of an object code, and they would be found underneath professional services. When we look at our operational things, they're generally booked in our in the function code 2310, which is school board. And then within that school board area, that's where we have our legal expenditures.
Okay, has any consideration been thought of in regards to making that a separate line item? You know, and I guess for sake of argument, I could say, for example, you've got homework club, which is 1490, I think. It's a little blurry on mine, but you know, that's only like a $24,000 line item. Is there any consideration to making legal a separate line item?
If you're talking function codes, those are dictated by the state. They create a financial accounting handbook. So when you're looking at 1410 co-curricular, that is defined in the New Hampshire Public School Accounting Handbook as that. They don't have a specific function code for legal. That's a professional service within several function codes, usually in a district.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike Latasi, did you have a question? You're on mute, Mike.
Couple of questions, and you actually called it out. There's a $94,000 line item for COVID IT. Could you talk about that a little bit, please?
Sure. So way back in, it feels like a lifetime ago, but last March, when we found out COVID had hit, the state had indicated to us early on, I believe it was probably around the middle of March, saying there will be some funding available to address some needs for COVID. And the recommendation was made to districts to track those expenditures related to COVID separately, so that if and when the funding came through, you could easily extract that information to seek reimbursement. So you're actually going to see three COVID-related function codes in our chart of accounts.
Right.
There's 2231, which is IT. There's 1106, which is in general education that's related to COVID. There's 2601, which is for buildings and facilities. So you know, we have the and of course the IT one you mentioned. So what we do is those numbers throughout the year, those have fluctuated a whole lot because we booked a lot of expenditures there. But then when funding came through, we were able to move some of those expenditures into a grant fund as a reimbursement. So this is kind of what's left that we haven't yet been able to find a funding source for. And again, when you look at those numbers, it's important to remember general education, a lot of times those were special or binders or different things that teachers had to buy to address remote instruction. But in buying those other supplies, didn't have students in for the last part of last year and in our some students who were remote and required a different kind of supply for that. Our cleaning regimen, the hand sanitizers, different things like that maybe we had even in our supply budget before, but not to the degree that we needed to address COVID. Those would also be in those various areas as well.
So is the 94, could you tell me what the 94,000 is for?
Yeah, it is for technology expenditures. If you look, the reason it's 94,000 is we didn't have a budget for it.
Right.
But, right, so that's why it's showing it as that negative, but it was for Chromebooks to bring our students up to one-to-one instruction, supporting devices, software that we needed to purchase, such as the platform you're working on, Zoom. We had to find a lot of ways for people to connect in a remote environment with teachers and students. Some students didn't have access to internet at their homes, so we purchased things like hotspots to help students connect to the internet and take part in the learning experience. There's a lot of different things that go into the IT, and then some of them are staff facing too. We had some staff that had to teach remotely from home and work with remote students, and naturally we weren't prepared with extra equipment or monitors or different things because teachers used to teach from here. So there was a lot of ramp up to make sure that we could reach kids in every way we could, and to support our staff during this time to allow them to perform their instructional their duties to the highest degree possible.
So what's the plan to collect the Chromebooks, devices, hotspots, and monitors back?
I'll
They'll
have to defer to Susan on that one.
Yeah. So every year we go through a process of inventorying them. And we'll take them in and we'll clean up those devices, especially at the elementary school. So there's two different scenarios. One is that the school district is spend one-to-one from grade 5 through 12. And so that's kind of typical here. What a lot of the technology in terms of Chromebooks were related to those elementary school grades. And so for those, in fact, the board just approved a contract to buy carts for us to house those in. So they'll come back to us, and the IT department will, collect them and wipe them and make sure that they're all ready, put them in the carts so they're ready to go for school next year. And then the carts will be in classrooms. So then when teachers need to use it because they've modified their, instructional activities, that, kids will have access to that. Also, we have built into our calendar next year, one day a month that we will be engaging in curriculum development work and training. We are introducing a core math program next year. And so on those days, students will work from home. And if the work that they'll be doing requires, a Chromebook, then we'll send them home the day before. So the kids are all set and ready to go. So we'll collect them and we'll get them all ready. And they've been inventoried when they come in. Our IT department does inventory them. And so we know, who has them, what the numbers are that are associated with the student that has the device. So we have good tracking systems in place for that.
So is it reasonable to expect that the technology line item, I think it's 2280, for next year will go down because you have $94,000 worth of found equipment that the government gave you?
We are going to, again, use those devices that we got at the elementary school to support new, strategies that we're using. We did an awful lot of modifications to what we're doing this year, and we don't want teachers to throw all of that learning out the door just because we're coming back in. So we will put those to good use. There's always going to be some money for technology because for the one-to-ones, we buy, so when every 3 years, we buy new devices for kids. because Chromebooks only have a useful life in our environment of a couple of years. Kids taking them, back and forth to school and using them are pretty hard on the equipment. And so built into the one-to-one program is replacement. So every 5th grade class, when they come up, get Chromebooks, and then I believe their freshman or sophomore year, their freshman year, they get another Chromebook. So there's always money in there for the Chromebooks for the the classes that are moving up. So they have reliable equipment. So there'll always be money for that, to continue to support the learning activities that we have in place for kids. It won't be as much, obviously, because we won't.
And Mike, we'll see that when we go through their upcoming budget
Yes.
request.
Just jumping over to salaries for a minute. I notice it's on the financial statement page that you're dead on certain things. Professional administrator, even facilities, you're off by just a percentage point or two. But other things you're significantly have different percentages, 52%, 40%, 15%. Can you comment on that? Why some you're right on and some you're off by maybe 50%?
Sure, that's a good question. Some of that has to do with the categories of the employee. So when you look over at professional, those would typically be our teachers and our instructional people.
Right.
But when you look at paraprofessionals, tutors, and monitors, I'm sure if you've been out in the community, you have heard many people, including retail and restaurateurs, talking about the difficulty of hiring staff right now. We have experienced significant retraction and contraction in the labor pool during COVID-19. And frankly, a school is a place that some people did not want to work. We lost a lot of our subs. We had trouble filling some of our positions. So what you're looking at with those variances are actually variances to the good for the budget,
Right.
meaning we couldn't fill some of these positions and vacancies. So when you look at,
I'll add though, Mike, she gave you, as part of that, on page 7, she kind of goes over what those variances are. Like salaries and professionals,
Yes,
the reasons for them.
yes. Well, I had just heard that the town was saying that we're trying to be at a certain percentage point, and I just see a large difference in some of them. I'm just wondering, did we budget incorrectly? Did we, because the school was physically closed, we weren't using those salaries, or is it just that these people were missing in action?
I think there's a continuum of reasons. In our facilities and our food service area, as Jana said, we weren't able to get the staff that we were looking for. And so we outsourced. And when you outsource, the money is spent on a different line than it is when you're have an employee. So some of the costs that we have for our facilities are not appearing in that line as a result of that. Others are IEP driven. So when you're looking at paraprofessionals, tutors in particular, those are driven by student needs, and we have not been, there is a shortage. And so they're not positions we can cut out of the budget because they're tied to mandated services for students who have, learning needs. But nonetheless, we weren't able to fill those positions, and students weren't able to receive those services that we had hoped for. Many people, as Jana said, did not want to work under the pandemic conditions, you know, when we have, you know, 400 students and, you know, 100 staff members in a school, that's a little intimidating, you know, when you're hearing about social distancing and, you know, no more than 50 people or 20 people at times, you know, allowed to be in a common space. So there's been a whole host of reasons why we have not been able to fill positions. In some cases, we filled them by outsourcing. So we've really had to beg, borrow, and steal. In fact, every day, people from my office go down to cover lunches at the schools just so we can be open for learning for our kids, because we just can't find people. So lunchtime is not a good time to try to reach administrators because we're typically, you know, performing lunch duty because we don't have people who are applying for the job. Doesn't mean the need isn't there, and it doesn't mean that when we get into non-COVID environments, we won't have more success. But as we've seen in the labor market everywhere, you know, the minimum wage people are willing to come in and work is rising, you know. When McDonald's is hiring people for $13 an hour, you know, down the street, and our starting pay for a paraprofessional is $13 an hour, you know, people, you know, might prefer to do that work and have more flexibility than they can here, and not working around as many people. So I think there's a lot of reasons why people are choosing where they're going to work and for what pay they're going to accept to work, you know, right now. So.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So I have two. So similar to the town side, I guess COVID hasn't been the disaster that we thought it might be. In fact, it kind of looks like you may end the year with a surplus. Is that a fair statement? And what happens if there is a surplus? You just carry it over to the next year to reduce next year's budget request?
Yeah, any appropriated funds, when the voters vote to accept our budget and we get an appropriated fund balance, there are parameters about how we can spend that and what we can do. But if we are unable to expend those funds at the end of the year, they basically go back.
And it kind of sounds like there's potentially additional COVID funds that you can tap into that you can expend over actually the next couple of years. Can you just briefly talk about that a little bit? What that might do, or how that might impact the budgets?
Well,
best guess or best wishful thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean, the COVID money isn't to reduce our budget. It's
No.
to help, you know, support additional services that we'll need in order to close the, hopefully the learning loss gap, and any additional support services that kids are presenting when they return. I mean, we know that mental health issues are a challenge. They've been on the rise in our field for the last probably 8 to 8 years or so. And with COVID, it just exacerbated mental health issues that are out there. So those resources that we're getting from the federal government are really to help to acknowledge, you know, that we're going to have additional expenses that otherwise wouldn't be present. And those are available to us over the next couple of years. What we have tried to do, and one of the things, we will be giving back money, there's no question about that, because although we've had expenses for COVID that we didn't anticipate, there was also programming that we did not implement this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we did not have field trips this year. You know, we only offered varsity sports this year. There's certain things that we just, you know, normally under normal circumstances would have done and we didn't do. professional develop's another one, right? We didn't have people going out to conferences. We didn't have speakers coming in and working with teachers. We didn't hire consultants unless they were essential to doing the work with kids. So in all of those areas, we just didn't spend money that we would always and typically be spending. So we have some savings that offset COVID expenses anyways. And then in addition to that, we've gone after every red nickel we can find in order to even, you know, really, we have done everything we can to transfer and leverage those grants in any way we can to say the taxpayers here are the court of last resort, not first resort. So as a result of that, we will have, you know, a pretty significant amount of money we'll be returning back, but it's not something that's sustainable, or it's not because we don't need it. It's because we are leveraging opportunities to save taxpayers money without having to compromise the services we need to deliver for the students that we have here. So I would say, you know, Jana, her team, the assistant superintendent, Deb Black and Erica McNeil, our student services director, have really, they'll sit here. It's amazing what they're doing to move money away from our budget. But those are one-time occurrences. You know, last year we had, you know, some money that rolled over because of COVID that we didn't spend. This year we will have that. When I calculated it with Jana earlier this year, and we made a presentation, it was over $1 million we knew that we weren't going to spend because of COVID. And then since then, you know, as you know, there's been other grant monies that have become available, and we've tapped into those. But some of the longer term grant money we're not tapping at this point. We want to have the kids come back. We've done our state testing. It's going to conclude, I think, this week. We'll continue to look at where the learning gaps are for kids, and we'll develop some programming to try to, you know, address their needs. So we can't say right this minute, you know, what that's going to be until we get all the data that we need in order to make informed decisions. So, so we'll be able to give more information. We'll be presenting more information to the board in you know, the second meeting in June around how we think we're going to land this year.
And
We'll share that
Susan,
information with you.
and Susan or Jenny could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the board's discretion to retain either 2.5% or 5% of any.
Yeah, actually, Gary, you're astute to pick up on that. In the fall of 2020, the legislature, in the previous cycles, when you've been on a board member, we've had the capacity to retain up to 2.5% of our remaining balance in a contingency fund. And in the fall, the legislature voted to expand that to 5%, which of course, that's a much bigger number. It doesn't mean we have to do that. It's still within the board's discretion to do that, but I've already prepared some documentation to bring to the board in June relative to that new legislation, to have the board consider what amount feels right, what amount they would like to consider, if any. You know, 198:B4 was voted in several years ago. The town has, the taxpayers voted to allow the school board to make that discretion as to the amount. So that will be coming to the board in a meeting probably in June.
And then just to reiterate what Susan said, last year we returned over $1 million to the tax rolls, and we don't know how much this year, for a significant amount, but we just need to caution that you and the taxpayers that this is a fortunate side effect of the pandemic we're in, but not something we should get used to and
Right.
not count on each year.
So the warrant article, I don't recall that said that allowed the school board to make that decision.
Yep, it's I can find the exact one and the date. It was,
That's okay. That's fine. I didn't realize that.
I
yeah,
don't
a
think
year
it's in the
ago.
warrant article. I think it's the state RSA that allows it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was an RSA, but the voters had to vote on it in a warrant article to do that. I have the voting record somewhere. I can't recall off the top what year, but I can certainly bring that to you.
I don't know. For some reason, I thought it was a warrant article that said you could keep up to some some amounts or, but.
Oh, I think you're thinking of, there's a different articles that we do each year that say you allow us to retain up
Right.
to.
So this isn't that what you're talking about isn't that warrant article, I take it, right?
Well, we have certain warrant articles. I think I understand where you're going with this, Joe. There are certain ones that we write, like we'll say we'd like to fund a capital reserve
Mhm.
up to $60,000, and that's dependent on if we have $60,000 left to fund it. I think that might be what you're thinking of. Those
Yeah.
those appear on the warrant every year, but this was one vote taken several years ago. Again, I apologize, I can't remember the year, but it allowed, the voters adopted it in perpetuity until rescinded to allow the school district to set up a contingency fund under that particular RSA.
Okay, well, that's fine. Another question I had, you made a comment that you're only doing the financials quarterly. And it seems to me like last year, every month we got financial statements and we reviewed them every month.
No, not since I've been here. And the year before I came, there wasn't any of that either. It's been quarterly here for quite some time, Joe.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know when it was ever monthly, but it hasn't been for at least 3 years.
Roger,
I seem to recall that it was
Mike?
monthly last budget season.
yeah,
Well, I was the only one here last year and we did them quarterly. We didn't have a business manager last year.
but after Jana came in, because maybe,
We don't prepare them internally except for quarterly.
Yeah, I don't believe we reviewed the monthly.
No,
Not
we
the
didn't,
school,
we didn't
just
meet
the
with,
town.
yeah, we didn't meet with this board monthly. We only actually met with this board a couple of times last year.
okay, all right, that's fine.
Maybe that's why it's impressionable to you. Because when we did meet, we did review our financials, but we were only invited to budget.
Yeah,
committee
it seems like we
meetings
see
maybe 3
Jana every
times.
month, huh?
Yeah,
I have one other question. I don't know if it's within our authority here, but has the school board discussed anything about joining the lawsuit with Oyster River and the other school districts to, for over school funding? Is
That was-
Newmarket considering doing that?
that was brought to my attention just a week before the lawsuit, you had to join the lawsuit. I wasn't aware of it. And the superintendent from, I think it's Conval, or I believe is the sponsoring group. That was my understanding. But anyways, no, we haven't had a chance to even consider it, and now it's closed.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for the school? How's the girls softball team doing?
I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know. I didn't get a text.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. And we'll see you, I don't know, maybe in a couple of months here, I guess.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Jana.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you, Susan.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the appointment to open positions. Ned Carpenter and Brian Hickey have volunteered to dive into this. What I'd like to, we'll start with Ned. Ned, would you like to introduce yourself and give a
Yeah,
little bit of background?
can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, just want to make sure everything's functional here. Yeah, Ned Carpenter, just been a resident here in Newmarket for 3 years. My wife and I moved here after having moved around quite a few times for my job, and we wanted to move back to Northern New England after the kids both got out of high school. At this point, they've both gotten out of college, so we're tuition free. That's a good thing.
Mhm.
been here for the past 3 years, gotten familiar and embedded in the community and like it here. I went to Plymouth State a long time ago, graduated in 1988, and fell in love with New Hampshire at that point. My family is rooted in New England, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. And I work for a Fortune 200 company. I don't know that should name the company, but rather large company that I run the New England division for the company. As the general manager, I'm responsible for all that goes on in New England in the 5 facilities that we operate. So have some, obviously some personnel, HR stuff in my background, a lot of operational P&L management, facilities management, etc. So fairly diverse background, and just looking to get more involved in the community, do what I can to help out and be part of the process. So if you got any questions, feel free to shoot away.
Anyone have any questions for Ned? No? Seeing none, would somebody like to make a motion to appoint Ned?
Make a motion to appoint Ned Carpenter to the Budget Committee, term expiring, I believe, March of 2022.
Yes, that's correct, right?
I'll second that,
Eh,
Joe. Gary
second.
Swanson.
March or April. I think actually the election is in March, but you goes until April, I believe. So we have in a second by Gary.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll take a roll call. If you're in favor, say aye. Mr.
Aye.
LaBranch,
Aye.
Mr. Caddy,
Aye.
Mr. LaSavoy,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Matazzi.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Whether you like it or not, Ned, you're in.
Congratulations.
Ned,
Thank you.
All right, next we have Mr. Hickey. Mr. Hickey, would you like to introduce yourself? And
Absolutely. Brian Hickey, I've moved to Newmarket back in 2017, December 2017. Really just love it here. Great community. Great bunch of people I've met over the last few years. My background for almost 20 years was I worked for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I was CFO for the Human Resource Division, and I was the administrator for our workers' compensation for the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And did that for 20 years, and then got out of that and went into business with my brother. And we install commercial playgrounds now. So I haven't done budget for a few years, but had done it for quite a few years and pretty much most of my working career. And Ned's a friend of mine, and we've been talking, and it just, he said he was thinking about doing this, and I said that would be awesome to be part of it. Love to be able to give back to the community, and learn a lot about what goes on at this level of government. And I just think it would be really fun to be part of.
well, did you have fun tonight?
Yeah, very interesting. It was good.
Okay. Any questions for Brian? Seeing none, would somebody like to make a motion?
So moved.
second,
Who's that? Chris? Who seconded?
Yeah. Gary Swanson.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do the call again. Mr. LaBranch? Mr. Caddy?
aye.
Mr. LaSavoy?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Matazzi?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Welcome aboard, guys. You have to go down to the town hall to see the town clerk, Terry Littlefield, and she will swear you in, and then with the next meeting, then you can actually you can actually vote.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Got it.
Joe,
Yep.
I have one question. I I guess something that popped into my mind, Ned, you did not feel comfortable releasing the name of the company you work for.
Oh,
So I'd like to ask the following question. Does that company have any business with the town of Newmarket?
oh, no, we do not.
Thank you.
I mean, the only reason I say that is just for anonymity, you know, I try to keep that separate, but no, we do not have any business with the town of Newmarket.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, next thing is the calendar. Did you guys all see the calendar that I sent out? Any questions on it, comments? I think in the past, we met the third Monday of the month, and I changed it to the last Monday of the month, assuming that we would give us more time to have the financials from both the school and whatever. I don't know, for some reason or other, I thought the school was giving it to us on a monthly basis. Any questions, comments on the calendar?
I think it looks good.
I think it was pretty self-explanatory, so I booked all the dates.
All right,
I'm
there are
very
some,
happy with the locations.
yeah, I changed it to the town hall starting June. I was hoping Steve would be here tonight to clarify that, but as you're probably aware, they rescinded the mask ordinance last week. And I believe that the town hall is now open for us to meet. Is there anybody that isn't vaccinated? I believe that if people that are vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. And so but I will clarify that with Steve. The other thing I'll clarify with Steve is I did send him a note asking if he could set up something for the new members to meet, like the police chief and the fire chief and the water and sewer and the rec department. I haven't heard back from Steve on that. I'll ring his ear again on that. Okay. All right. Okay, so no criticism of the calendar. We'll stick to that for the time being. Approval of the minutes. Did everybody take a look at the minutes from the April 19th minutes? Any questions, comments?
It looked fine.
I think they're fine.
Joe, I make a motion, we accept the budget committee minutes of April 19th.
Okay, from Gary.
I'll second.
Second,
And who is that? I'm sorry.
I,
Richard.
It's Ms. Lissaboy. Okay.
it was a match.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the minutes of April 19th. All those in favor say aye. Mr. LaBranch.
Aye.
Mr. Caddy,
Aye.
Mr. Lessavoy,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Matazzi.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay. Approval of the minute done. I think we're almost done, guys, here. Any other business? Anything anybody would like to bring up?
One quick item, I just found out the girls softball team won 12-8.
Yay, good. Wow, good, very good. Yes, Chris?
Yeah, so the only question I have is now that we're moving into the town hall, will we still run the meetings via Zoom? So if you happen to be out of town, you can join in or something?
I'll clarify that, but yes, I believe what the, it's what the town council is doing, and it's what the school is, committee's doing. So yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other? See no other questions, comments, whatever. I'd make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So move.
Mhm.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, then we won't do a roll call, just raise your hand, say aye.
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 All right, everybody said.
Aye.
All right, guys, well, I'll see you next month. I'll send out, I'll CC you guys on on the note. Oh, I do have one other thing. I'm sorry. I did get the town financials for April. I'll send you that, and maybe hopefully we can get the other town or the May financials before our meeting in end of June. So maybe we may do May and June, or April and May in our June meeting for the town. And I don't know what we'll do on the school side here. Maybe they'll have something, maybe they won't, that we'll need to talk about. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Meeting
Thank you.
adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.